Whiskey, the drink of kings, poets, rebels, and innovators. But have you ever wondered how this beloved spirit came to be? Join us on a journey through time, from ancient civilizations to the modern whiskey we enjoy today. It's a tale full of legends, wars, and innovations that have shaped whiskey into one of the world's most popular spirits. The story of whiskey begins long before it was distilled into the golden spirit we know today. In ancient times, alcohol was being fermented in one form or another in many parts of the world. One of the earliest recorded instances of alcohol production dates back to around 7000 BCE in ancient China, where people brewed a fermented rice drink. But it was in the Middle East and Mediterranean that distillation would first take root. Distillation, the process of heating liquid to create vapors and then cooling them back into a liquid form, is credited to the ancient Egyptians around 3000 BCE. While they didn't distill whiskey as we know it, they used this method to create perfumes and medicinal concoctions, laying the groundwork for later alcohol distillation. By the 8th century, distillation techniques had spread across the Islamic world, where they were refined. It was here, in places like Baghdad and Damascus, that the Arabs perfected the art of distillation and the ability to create stronger alcoholic beverages. It wouldn't be until the 15th century that the technique would reach Europe and evolve into what we now recognize as whiskey. In medieval Europe, the art of distillation was used primarily for medicinal purposes. In fact, the earliest references to distilled spirits in Europe are found in ancient medical texts, where they were referred to as aqua vita, or water of life. This term was used to describe a powerful, clear liquid made by distilling fermented grains or fruits. It was in Ireland and Scotland during the 14th and 15th centuries that the distillation of grain-based alcohol began to resemble modern whiskey. By the 1400s, Irish monks were refining distillation methods using barley, and they called the drink Visbitha, meaning water of life in Gaelic. Scotland, too, was refining the art of whiskey making. With early evidence of barley-based distillation in the late 15th century, the legal production of whiskey in both countries would grow significantly in the 17th century, as taxes on whiskey were introduced in the 1700s, paving the way for the first commercial distilleries. As the British Empire expanded, so did the influence of whiskey. In the 1700s, Scottish and Irish distilleries began to export their whiskey to other parts of Europe and eventually to the American colonies. Whiskey became a staple of social life, and by the time the U.S. was founded, it was already a key part of the American spirit. In the United States, the whiskey trade really took off in the 18th century, with distilleries cropping up in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Kentucky. But it wasn't until the 19th century that the creation of bourbon. Whiskey became synonymous with American identity. The name bourbon comes from Bourbon County, Kentucky, where whiskey production flourished. Bourbon whiskey is distinct because it is made from at least 51% corn and aged in new charred oak barrels. This process gives bourbon its signature rich flavor and amber color, setting it apart from other types of whiskey. However, whiskey's journey wasn't always smooth. In the early 20th century, the United States entered a dark period for alcohol prohibition. From 1920 to 1933, the production, sale, and transportation of alcoholic beverages were banned in the U.S. During Prohibition, the whiskey industry was forced underground. Bootleggers and speakeasies flourished, and many distilleries turned to illegal methods of production. This era gave rise to notorious gangsters like Al Capone, and helped to solidify whiskey's place in American culture as a rebellious and defiant drink. When Prohibition was repealed in 1933, whiskey emerged stronger than ever. Distilleries reopened, and new methods of production were implemented, leading to smoother, more refined whiskeys that appealed to a broader audience. The modern whiskey we know today continued to evolve throughout the 20th century, with Scotch, bourbon, and Irish whiskey all becoming internationally recognized staples. By the late 20th century, whiskey experienced a renaissance. New distilleries popped up in both traditional whiskey countries and unexpected places. Japanese whiskey, for example, gained international acclaim for its smoothness and complexity. Taking on the craftsmanship and tradition of Scottish distilling, today whiskey is enjoyed across the globe, from the highlands of Scotland to the hills of Kentucky, from Japan to Ireland. Whether sipping a smoky scotch, a bold bourbon, or a rich Irish whiskey, one thing is clear. Whiskey has become more than just a drink. It's a story of innovation, tradition, and passion.